In a remote countryside, where rice fields stretched endlessly like green carpets under the golden afternoon sun, there lived a strange old man whose name no one knew. No one knew where he came from, how old he was, or where he stayed. People only knew one thing. He would appear whenever a balloon got torn. They called him the balloon mender. He never spoke a single word. Not once. No complaints, no stories, no explanations. He simply smiled, a gentle, warm smile, as if nothing in this world could shake the calm in his heart. Then he would bend down, softly take the torn balloon from the hands of confused children, and carefully mend it with his thin, bony fingers that wore. He never judged whether the balloon was pretty or not, new or old. Some were barely recognizable as balloons anymore, yet he still patiently stitched them back together, piece by piece. Never in a rush, never complaining, as if this were the most important task in the world. At first, the children treated him like some kind of amusement. They giggled, pointed, and teased the old man with his worn-out cloth bag full of needles, thread, scraps of rubber, and strange glue powder. The adults shook their heads, thinking he was odd. Mending balloons? What for, they said. They're cheap, throwaway toys. If one pops, just buy another. Who patches them up like old clothes? But the old man paid no mind to the whispers. He just smiled quietly and kept mending. There were days when he'd show up at the edge of the village just as a little girl burst into tears over her dropped balloon. Other times, he'd sit under the banyan tree in the market's corner, silently stitching together a balloon crushed by a passing truck. No one could explain how he always knew where to be or when, and no one ever saw where he went afterward. Like the wind, he came when needed and faded into the air once his task was done. And, slowly, something strange began to happen. But that's another story. For now, the villagers only see an old man, nameless, homeless, wordless, carrying a needle and thread and a smile that never fades. An old man who spent his life mending balloons everyone else had given up on. Little by little, people began to notice the balloons the old man mended were no longer just ordinary balloons. They didn't just float higher or stay up longer. They seemed to carry something invisible, something that made people feel lighter, as if the sadness in their hearts had somehow been tied to the string and lifted into the sky. Children who had been on the verge of tears over a popped balloon would suddenly beam with joy when they received it back, patched by the old man's hands, a smile as radiant as the morning sun. And a strange thing was, it wasn't just the children who smiled. Adults started to feel something different, too. There was once a man who had lost his job. He sat slumped in the corner of the market for days, his eyes dull like ashes. One afternoon, he happened to see the old man mending a torn balloon. When the balloon was reinflated and gently floated up again, the man found himself smiling, his first smile in weeks. He didn't understand why. All he knew was that something in the soft rustle of the glue strips and the silent smile of the old man had lifted a weight from his chest. The villagers began to talk, but no longer with mockery. They said the old man had a healing magic, that each patch he sewed didn't just fix a balloon. It somehow mended the invisible cracks inside people's hearts. There was a little girl who had cried for days after her parents' divorce. One day, she accidentally popped the heart-shaped balloon her father had given her. The old man arrived, silent as always, and patched it back together. When the girl held it in her arms again, her eyes turned clear. She said nothing, just hugged the balloon to her chest, as if it still carried her father's love, as if the pain had been stitched back together. No one could understand how the old man always seemed to know exactly when and where someone was in need. Maybe it was the sound of quiet crying under a tin roof, or just the sadness in a child's eyes by the roadside. Perhaps he could hear sounds that normal ears couldn't, sounds that came from the heart. And from that day on, he was no longer a stranger. He became a part of the village's memory. No one ever called him by name, because there was no need. To everyone, he was simply the one who mended what was broken. And then one day, something happened that no one could have ever expected. It was a peaceful afternoon. The sun poured soft golden light across the dusty village road, and the children, as always, ran and laughed with their bright, cheerful balloons. One little boy, caught up in his excitement, accidentally let his favorite balloon snag on a tree branch. It tore wide open. He froze, staring at the deflated shape in his hands, his eyes welling with tears. And just like a familiar kind of magic, the old man appeared once again. He came from the far end of the red dirt road, his worn cloth bag swaying gently with each slow step. He said nothing, just smiled, sat down on the grassy edge of the path, and reached out to gently take the torn balloon from the boy's trembling hands, just as he had done so many times before. But this time, the old man didn't finish the patch. Just as he picked up his needle, he paused. The smile still lingered on his lips, but his hands began to tremble. And then, ever so quietly, his head slumped onto his shoulder. The balloon slipped from his fingers and rolled softly to the ground. And he, the one who had mended hundreds of balloons, who had gently stitched together so many broken hearts, was gone. As S.I., news of his passing spread like the first chill wind of winter. Within hours, the entire village gathered around where he lay. The ad. Everyone thought they would cry. But Strand, because in that stillness his smile remained, gentle, warm, unchanged. As if, in his hand, he still held the needle and a tiny strip of glue, unfinished but not incomplete. They laid his body in a simple bamboo basket, lined with old balloons, the only things he had ever left behind. No papers, no money, no final words. Just the mended balloons, and a smile that had never faded. The entire village stood in silence for a long, long time. No one spoke, but everyone felt something deeper than words. The balloon mender was gone, and he left behind a space, not in the air, but in the hearts of those who had once received from him a whole, mended balloon. After the old man passed away, the village fell silent for many days. Children no longer played with balloons in the yard. The grown-ups stopped their usual chatter. It was as if no one had the heart for joy anymore, now that the one who quietly mended broken things had left, without even a word of goodbye. But then, on the 7th day after his farewell, something strange happened. That morning, while a thin mist still clung to the surface of the village pond, the children were the first to see it. Hundreds of colorful balloons floating gently across the sky. No one knew where they came from, but they soared in a perfect arc, glimmering in the morning sun like a flock of rainbow birds. The children ran out into the fields, calling to one another in delight. The grown-ups stopped their chores and looked up in awe. Each balloon had a small piece of paper tied to its string. And as people began to catch them, not with their hands, but with faith, those tiny notes revealed the final gift the old man had left behind for everyone. On each slip of paper were carefully written words, as if traced in sunlight. Every tear can be mended, if we have enough patience and enough love. Balloons don't burst because they're weak, but because they carry too much pressure, just like the human heart. Don't throw away what's old. Try mending it first. You never know, it might still fly. People stood in stunned silence. The old man had never spoken a word, and yet now, through the balloons, he spoke to them all, not with a voice, but with a soul. Not to explain, but to leave behind something greater, a quiet kind of hope. The little boy who once tore his favorite balloon caught one too. On his note, it said, "Don't be afraid to break things, because with each patch, you'll understand a little more about how love endures." And for the first time in days, the village laughed through tears. From that day on, something began to change. People no longer threw away little things so easily. Children learned to take better care of their toys. Adults learned to be more patient with one another. In that village, some began to mend, not just balloons, but clothes, broken apologies, and the long silences in their homes. And whenever someone accidentally popped a balloon, instead of crying, they would smile and softly say, "If the old man were still here, he would have patched it right up." No one knew how he had prepared hundreds of balloons for that final day. But everyone believed that old man never truly left, because sometimes those without a name leave behind things that words can never quite explain. Since the day the balloons carrying his final messages floated into the sky, the old balloon mender became a legend in that little village. But no one built a statue for him. No one erected a shrine or lit incense in his memory, because deep down, everyone knew he didn't belong to grand ceremonies or solemn rituals. He belonged to laughter, to quiet, sun-drenched afternoons where children's laughter danced alongside balloons shimmering in the breeze. He belonged to every little tear in life that people learned to slow down and mend instead of throwing away in haste. From then on, whenever a child accidentally popped a balloon, no one scolded or got upset. Instead, they would gently ask, "Would you like to try patching it up?" And the child would sit down, carefully, patiently, as if they were piecing back together a tiny part of their world. Even if the stitches were clumsy, even if the patch was crooked, within each delicate gesture was something priceless the old man had quietly passed on, a tenderness toward what had been broken. People in the village still occasionally spoke of him, but not in fairy tale voices. They spoke with eyes that sparkled, or during quiet moments when they looked up and spotted a lone balloon drifting across the clouds. No one could say for sure if it was just the wind, or if perhaps he was smiling from somewhere far away. Some say that on bright moonlit nights, they've heard faint, familiar laughter echoing from the end of the road. A gentle sound, warm and known, as if he were still nearby. Others swear that in dreams, he's come to them, handing over a small balloon, and then disappearing as if he'd never existed at all. No one can prove what's real and what's imagined. But there's one thing everyone believes without a doubt. The old man never truly left them, because every time someone chooses to love what's been broken, every time they patiently mend what once seemed worthless, that's when his spirit returns, not in body, but in a quiet faith, as light as a balloon, shapeless, invisible, yet just strong enough to lift a weary heart. And so, the story of a nameless balloon mender lives on, not in books, but in the gaze of a child, in the hands of someone learning how to heal, and in the hearts of those who still remember how to smile. You see, not everyone is born to do grand things. Not everyone writes history, invents something brilliant, or changes the world. But every person, if quiet enough, kind enough, can help mend a small piece of this world, just like that nameless old man once did. He left behind no fortune, no family, no successor, but he gave us something far more valuable, a gentle reminder that even the things we believe are broken can still fly, if we are patient, if we love enough. Perhaps our lives are a lot like those balloons, fragile, easy to forget, sometimes torn by pressure, carelessness, or our own mistakes. And often we say, "Let go, it's broken. It's no good anymore." But what if someone came, smiled, and said, "Let me help you patch it up"? Maybe things would be different. We can't stop all the pain. We can't avoid every break. But we can learn to heal. We can learn to mend sadness, repair what's torn, and hold on to what once felt too old to matter, instead of tossing it aside too quickly. The old man's story is a quiet reminder that gentleness is never meaningless, that even the smallest act, like patching a balloon for a child, can light up a whole village. And maybe, if it spreads far enough, it could spark hope in a world that's learning to piece itself back together day by day. You don't have to change your whole life overnight. Start with something small, something very small, a simple apology, a bit of patience, a hug, a moment of silence to truly listen, or simply choosing not to throw something away just because it looks too broken. And then you'll notice your heart feels lighter and life begins to rise again, like a balloon newly mended. So if today you feel not good enough, not strong enough, not whole, please remember, you don't need to be perfect to keep flying. You just need someone who believes you're still worth patching up. And if no one's done that for you yet, be the first to do it for yourself. Because the most beautiful balloons aren't the ones that never tore, but the ones that, despite the damage, still found a way to rise again beneath the gentle sunlight of a heart that knew how to heal.